no, I think, because I got sewing on Friday night. I got sewing machine
Oh gosh, well done on your Facebook's lovely.
well, just in case, you know. And when I did that, I was stripped the notes.
Oh gosh.
So, 5:30 this morning, I was not breaking my brains. I'm pretty sure I really got to this. Well done. The mask will not be missing.
I think, you know, for the opening, it was rather terrible weather in Wanganui on Friday, and I thought, oh, do I want to travel in the dark in this weather? So I didn't come. I was very tempted, but oh, I really
Number of senators came to it.
oh, good. Yeah.
I don't know when, I don't think we're going to go up there. No, it's not time. Mary and Michael Fitzsimmons got their sessions.
Oh, okay.
Some of them might not.
So I'm going to have to refer to them.
Don't you find that if you're going somewhere to do something, I assemble everything, and then when I finally get there, I find one of them's missing. Now
Yes,
today,
I know. It's
I didn't have a pen, so I scratched around. I thought I'd packed my pen, and I scratched around the car. I finally found it all. And I walk in here, and now I've got the both of
You've
theirs
got one.
now.
Oh, look, I do know. I agree. It's just,
You just sort of panic and you can't find it.
yes.
Oh, Kelsey seems to be my little bit.
She might not know where it is.
You see, I've had been here previously, but my daughter actually drew me a map, but I found everything my way and didn't reconcile. So I just decided to follow my nose, and I did find it easily. But
Well, Kelsey's only in Hunterville, so she probably comes to fielding reasonably often.
yes.
We're missing Kelsey, so we don't
Yeah.
need to wait a minute. Thank
You
you.
get away.
Yeah. Thank you. Got some Mary McCullum speaking on.
Actually, you know, Michael Fitzsimmons' book, Michael, I thought you were dead, but
Oh, yes.
yes. They're talking about the joy of finding joy through poetry.
Yeah.
A lot of people find poetry through joy, but finding joy through poetry seems particularly useful this time.
Right. Yes.
And I had considered going to that because I've been put off writing poetry.
I'm sorry, such weird. Sorry, just reading. Process.
Yes.
She's held up the secretary but she'll be here as soon as
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Right. Thank you very much.
It's all right.
I was here before to introduce you to Christina Sanders.
Pleasure.
You will connect soon.
Well, I found a notebook in the shop, which is perfect for you, which I should have brought today because I'm going to post it to you. But if I went and I could have brought it today to give it to you, but it's perfect for your writing block or whatever you've got. I think it will get you through it.
Right. I would like that. I'm not writing, Maggie.
Oh, are you?
Right. Writing a novel.
Oh, okay.
My poetry brain just went
It's gone
on
to one
the whole-
side,
just the whole drama and utopia thing. It just made me feel like as if to live down that you I have nothing further to say about life.
Well, I hope the lid pops off.
Yes. Well, it's been, well, I was going to sort out a website with Simon last week. And when I was setting up all this, I spoke to the beginning 6 weeks ago, I suppose. And I like to do quantity new stuff. New stuff. Like just
You'll get there. Yes.
it's quite nice.
It is absolutely on the single phrases, so definitely have a marvellous audience in waiting.
Well, should we start? Right, I'll just consult the audience.
All right, okay.
Hello, I'm Rachel Gray and I'm facilitating this booksellers session. And one of our booksellers is held up in Halcombe due to a traffic accident in which he is not involved, simply inconvenienced. So, would you like to wait another few moments for her to make her way here, or I have a good idea. Have you got questions for our booksellers anyway that you may like to just mention? Not they would be answering right now, but just to give us a flavour of the kind of listening that you may have. Yes, Vicky. Sorry, yeah. Thank you.
Enjoy it.
Thank you.
I think they should introduce themselves. I mean, I know
Well,
who they
this
are,
is Bruce McKenzie from Bruce McKenzie's Bookseller, and Lesley Stead from Paige's Book Gallery in Whanganui. And we're waiting for Kelsey Smith, who is quite happy to be referred to as new kid on the block in the booksellers world, from Hunterville. Hello, the very one.
I got to hear what she was saying, it was all a ploy.
Hunterville Village Bookshop. So thank you. I was just going to field some questions from the floor until you arrived.
Oh yes, well I apologise for being late, but we were coming down the hill and there was an accident in front of us, so I'm really sorry, but we had to stop and here I am now.
Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you. Well, so you've met
No,
Yes, I know Lesley.
It's lovely to meet you.
and Bruce McKenzie.
And Bruce I came to listen to at this forum a couple of years ago.
Yeah, the festival last year.
Oh, was it?
You're an old head, Bruce.
Well, having suggested that there may be questions, shall we leave the questions till later? All right. Okay. So thank you for making your way here against all odds. So to start off, let's talk about what being an independent bookseller actually means. Bruce, would you like to start?
Yes, okay. When I first thought about speaking about independent booksellers, I wondered actually what the term meant and where it came from, because when I started bookselling, which is a long time ago, I worked for a big old family company called Bennett's, which was famous in Palmerston North, and it was a big bookshop, family owned, and there were dozens of bookshops of that nature around New Zealand and around the world. And at the same time, we thought of ourselves as one bookshop, and the competition was the other big chains, which then was I'm talking back in the 60s when I started. They were Whitcoulls, which was actually still called Whitcomb & Tombs in those days, and London bookshops. And there was no challenge to your bookselling. I mean, I went into bookselling because I wanted to. Well, I didn't want to, but when I got there, I found that I did like doing it, and stayed. But there was. You grew up in this world of never thinking that anything would ever change from the flood of books that were pouring at you from England or the United States and a little bit within New Zealand. And it was your job to manage all that and keep up the sales. So that was the nature of bookselling then. And then I left that, when I left that shop in 1984, it was all very much like that. And then I had 14 years working for 2 different publishers as a sales manager, and then I returned, decided to open my own bookshop when I read about the Palmerston North Public Library opening. So I'd always had this feeling in the back of my mind that I would like to be have a little bookshop of my own and not have to worry about all this mess of stuff that keeps coming at you. So I started my shop in 1996, yes, and then there was still Whitcoulls and the Warehouse, and London bookshops had morphed into Paper Plus, basically, sort of. So, and that was still my big danger. I spent my first few years being absolutely terrified of what Whitcoulls and Paper Plus are doing, and they're always undercutting us on price, etc., etc. And then I can remember one day a person coming to the shop and said, I've just come back from the States, and there's this wonderful shop there called Borders. It's absolutely amazing. It's over 6 floors, and you know they have couches and coffee. And I thought, how am I going to fit couches in this little store? and you can take the books from their art stand and sit and look at them while you're having your coffee. I thought, well, I can't see how that's manageable. But anyway, so this was, actually that was just around about 1997, it was about the first year I was there, because Jeff Bezos, who you may have heard of, was the person who started Borders Bookshop. He started at the same time that I did, and he's now the world's richest man, and I'm in a little independent bookshop, and I'm not the world's richest man. I'm not even Hooker-Fitter's richest man. I'm not even College Street's richest man. But it doesn't matter, because I think what I will try to say here is that we're not interested now in those big chains. We don't sort of worry about them. Borders and all that have faded and collapsed, basically. Because I can remember being in Auckland once when there was a huge Borders up there, and people were telling me about it, and one of my best customers said, oh God, you must go there, it's just absolutely fantastic. They're open till 10 o'clock at night, and it's the coffee and the art books. So I went late at night there once, at around about 8 o'clock, and I sat and had a cup of coffee, and I saw people that actually were taking books off the stand and looking at them. I thought, this is unsustainable. You can't do this. And anyway, ultimately, Borders and Whitcoulls themselves, in the recent years, with the collapse in bookselling and retailing, basically, those big shops have gone, and now I feel it's the independent shops that, because we are here on our own, holding our own little piece together, I think we're sustainable.
It's interesting.
Okay,
so you're not when the others go down, they don't drag you with them.
Yeah, that's true, yes.
You've worked
yeah.
out how to sustain yourself.
Yeah.
That brings me to a question that I will ask later that
Yeah.
has to do with how do you sustain yourself. But let's look, actually you've answered one of the other questions, which was how is an independent bookshop different? And you've kind of answered that. What do you say, Lesley? Have you got anything to contribute to that?
Well, I think independent bookshops are different because they all have their own personality. I haven't been to Kelsey's bookshop yet, but I'm going to come
It's
one day.
definitely personality.
And I certainly have been to Bruce's bookshop and I love it, and we tell lots of people about it because we are into promoting other independent bookshops. But when I'm out and about on doing a roadie or going to Wellington or whatever, I love to visit all the independent bookshops and go and introduce myself, and you know, there's sort of like a camaraderie between us all because, you know, it isn't an easy industry, as Bruce is saying, to survive, and you have to be absolutely committed and believe in what you're doing. But they do, people come into our shop and they say, well, I've never seen another bookshop like this, because I do have couches, but I've got books all over them. And no doubt if I go to Kelsey's, you know, no doubt
I
I'll
don't
say,
have coffee, Bruce, sorry.
well, I went to Borders in Auckland when they were offering coffee and received the most dreadful service and actually said I would never go back again. And then next thing someone said, well, they've closed anyway. So, yeah, so that made me realise, of course, that the service is a big thing, and we are very, very hot on having the best possible service that we can provide. But yeah, I think the independents they all just have their own little, they make their own little stamp on the book world, and I think that's fantastic.
Kelsey, where are you in this?
I'm
Tell us a
on
bit about Hunterville Bookshop.
Yeah, well, I can tell you a little bit about Hunterville. It's huge, so it's not I'm very passionate about Hunterville, so I apologise in advance. Obviously, like in my background, I haven't been a bookseller since Bruce has, but Bruce McKenzie Bookstore was always a place where I'd just go, and it was like a little halo, and it was nice and warm, and I could find all sorts of books. So I've loved my time from my youth, which probably started at the Fielding Public Library, and I've loved the impact that books can make on you. I remember the first book that I read from this library, and it was Gallipoli by Jack Bennett, and I remember feeling emotion from reading it, and so I've had a love of books and what they can do to you. I'm totally not into Kindles. I think if you fall asleep with one of them and they'd smack you in the face, it's just not going to be the same as curling up with a good book. But I spent 25 years in health and then health services management, and when I was about 30 I decided I'd quite like to buy the bookshop in Hunterville. I could see some promise for it, and I'm a very small fish in a bigger pond, but just what Leslie's saying, I'll tell people to go to Bruce McKenzie or oh, hello, Christine Edge. You always get busted somewhere, don't you? Or, you know, put them onto another independent. And I think one of the nice things, Rachel, about being independent is that you're not forced to buy. And it just gives me pain thinking about it. 9 of, you know, one of these bestsellers that are really against your vibe of where you want to go, and you've got to sell those. So I enjoy the flexibility of being independent and just saying, not me, not me, not me. Oh, I like that one. Not me, not me. So I'm sure some sort of things will talk about buying and how to do that over the pen.
Oh, that's interesting, because I remember years and years ago, too many decades, and I'd like to say, I had a little bookshop. But that was in the days when there were gentlemen's agreements, apparently, between publishers in the United Kingdom. As opposed, a bookseller couldn't just go to the United States, because California particularly, a lot of very interesting books coming out. And I think we were on the cusp where booksellers were kicking out the UK publishers and saying, we'll have you when we need you, thanks very much, because the selection from California was so much more interesting. So we were sourcing books by the boxload from California back in those days, because the selection that you got from the British was very, very limited, and it was according to what the trade dictated. And that brings me to the situation nowadays. What is a bestseller? Who decides? Where is this data from? Because the Nielsen list that you were talking to me about covers the worldwide data collection base. But what does that say to writers, aspiring authors who want to sell books in New Zealand? What does it mean if you're on a bestseller list? How do you get there? And if you win an award, does that make any difference to your sales? And does it make any difference to what you buy? Is that a very complicated question?
Can I talk about that?
Yes.
Well, the Nielsen list at the moment is very interesting, and it concerns me in a way too, because I have a dislike and a distrust of bestseller lists, because they used to be manipulated very, very forcefully by the big publishers. It sort of mostly happened in the United States because they had a system where you sent out the book in big quantities to shops, and the bestseller lists were taken from the publishers, not from the booksellers. So, 200 copies of a book could have gone to your shop and you might have sold any. So those, in the old, say back to the 70s, 80s, those American and English bestseller lists were very suspect because they were publisher driven. They're not anymore, and the New York Times bestseller list is probably the best one because it's taken from shops all over the country and independents, etc. In New Zealand now we've got a real problem because the Nielsen data is gathered from a group of shops, and we all are connected through our computers for what we order and what we sell, and our records go into it, and so do a lot of independent shops and Paper Plus. But for some reason or other, Whitcoulls decided they weren't going to go into it because they didn't want anybody to share their data. And that philosophy came from farmers who actually now own Whitcoulls. So it's a retail attitude of theirs. They don't want anybody to know what they're selling. So they don't contribute to that Nielsen figure. And Unity Books in Auckland and Wellington, which are the main independent bookshops and sell a huge amount of interesting books of all types, they don't contribute either because they became obsessed with the worry that Amazon were picking up information from the Nielsen, or from what we contributed to Nielsen. So when you look at the Nielsen lists now, the best-selling list is published in several newspapers, and we all use it as a go-by. It's not really accurate because some of the major contributors aren't in it. But having said that, I think it is a good guide. But once again, because there's only a few of us contributing to it, we can get one of your books onto the bestseller list. If you have a launch with us and we sell 30 copies of your, or even 20 copies of your new book, because we're in the group that do contribute, they have a section on New Zealand fiction, which includes New Zealand novels and New Zealand poetry. Every maybe every week, might be every fortnight, they publish this list. You know, the best-selling New Zealand novel is Deborah Chandler or whoever, and there's 10 books they put in that list each week, and the sales of New Zealand novels, I regret saying this at a writing festival, but they are so small compared to everything else that if your poetry book is launched with us and it goes in our information into the thing, you'll be about number 2 or 3 on that list that week. And that's why when we when people come to us now, and here I am actually manipulating the bestseller list, but sometimes when we have an author, they say, I want to do this sales myself, and I say, well, that's fine, I don't mind about that, but if you do it through us, you'll go on to the list. And you know, it's important for New Zealand fiction and poetry that even if it's just you appear on it once, you know, for when you had your launch, it's very important that your name is out there in the press. So that's an interesting thing about the Nielsen list. And that they do publish 2 lists now. They do an independent stores only, and one's set across the whole trade. And I look at that whenever I can because they are completely different. There'll be books on the general list, which is basically what not Whitfields, but the Warehouse Pack Plus everybody else sells. It's quite a different range of books from what. There you can see the difference between independents, because the books that we do really well with don't appear in the general list at all, unless there's something like Margaret Atwood or something that's selling everywhere.
And what's your experience been, Lesley?
Well, we subscribe to Nielsen, but we don't contribute.
Don't you?
I don't know why we
I
don't.
think you
but
should.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm still learning. I've been in the book trades, you know, since 2004, but I'm still learning, so maybe we should be. But we find, you know, we do have a look through and see, you know, what's on the bestsellers list. We find we don't always fit with what the rest of the country or the rest of the world is calling a bestseller. Not at all. So, I don't know, I think that our shop just has its own personality, and yeah, and we never worry. And you know, that 50 Shades of Grey or whatever it was, 40 Shades of Grey, I just think that was just a massive media hype. And of course people bought up because of that media hype, but I mean, it was really, gosh, it was nothing to write home about. And yeah, I just think you've got to be very careful about what the media are pushing out there. And yeah, fortunately, our clientele, they seem to have minds of their own, and yeah, we often just don't match with that. But we don't worry about it. We just forge on, and go with what we know works for us. So, and you get a bit of a feel for it. When we're with reps and they're showing us books, we can see what's going to work. You do really. It's an intuitive thing. You do know what will work, and I mean, sometimes you might get it wrong, but not very often. It's just because we know our clientele so well, basically.
Can I ask something? But isn't the bestseller list? Well, Nielsen is the bestseller list, is it?
Well, there is a Nielsen bestseller list, but there would be others, yeah.
But I mean, I tend to steer away from the best selling because I always think, well, actually, they're usually the trashy ones that are really quick to read that people buy for a 1 hour train journey or something. I mean, they must get skewed in terms of a quick, light read. You know, people would buy more of.
See, our bestseller. I brought a copy.
War and Peace, are you? You know,
it's not even a novel. We have just sold dozens upon dozens upon dozens of this beautiful book. It's gone out of print, and then they do another print run. We've just ordered another 100. So
what is it? Could you read the
it's The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse by Charlie Mascari. and it's got beautiful illustrations. It makes a nice book for a gift, and it's full of wisdom basically. But I don't think
that is an exception, that book, because it's one of those wonderful books that crosses all.
it does. It
And
does.
it is it's a true bestseller because everybody likes it, and it's it is a bestseller. But I think the actual word bestseller has become misused and badly used by publishers. So nearly every book you pick up, it will have the word bestseller on the side somewhere. So there are so many bestsellers that there are no bestsellers really,
No.
except occasionally something like this comes along.
So this has been on the market maybe for 12 months or so. Came out just late last year, didn't it, Bruce? Have you got it? Kelsey?
I need to explain that I only actually sell New Zealand books.
Oh, do you only sell
Yeah,
New
but
Zealand
we'll get
books?
to that.
Okay.
But that one's heavily on social media.
Oh, is it? See,
Yeah.
okay, I'm not even very good at social media.
Neither
so-
am I, but I have, children in their 20s, so they tell me these things.
Oh, okay.
And it is, able to be given as a gift.
It is a
without-
lovely gift.
Which could, cater for a number of different people,
Mm.
accepting it as a gift.
Yeah. Anyway, so yes, we
It might
don't.
go missing from your bag.
Anyway, I just thought I'd bring it to show you what is our bestseller at the moment.
And that's interesting because actually when I was talking to you, Bruce, you were exactly saying that sort of thing that you brought up, that a lot of the bestseller lists are popular fiction.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to know that a real bestseller is something else entirely. Now, before we leave the subject of bestsellers, and I wanted to just talk about awards, I was talking to Kirsty Powell, who is an author. She came and saw you, I think.
No, she didn't.
Oh,
But
Have you
I
seen
have her
us?
book,
I
The
did.
Strength of
Yeah, we've sold dozens of that.
Yeah, The
That's
Strength
going
of
really well.
Eggshells. Yes, I did tell her to go up to see you.
It was just pre that little lockdown.
Was
thing
it?
that we
Oh,
had,
was.
so yes.
You're right, yes. Historical fiction. And I didn't know till yesterday, I bumped into her here, and she said she'd won the New Zealand Book Lovers Award. But it's done nothing extra for her sales, which is an interesting thing. And then you've got the Ockhams and the Ockham list. Do you notice people flocking to buy whatever's the top? And if anyone knows about the New Zealand Book Lovers Award, do people come in and say, I just heard about this book, I must have it?
Yes, they do,
There we
but
are.
not enough. And the New Zealand Awards, the Children's Bookshop Awards, which have just recently been announced, Children Book Awards, and that has had an exceptional response because the best book was a poetry book by the former poet laureate, Mophead. People probably know this
yes,
book.
I know
It's a
that.
lovely book. It's published by Auckland University Press. Surprisingly won the best book over a lot of other picture books and a lot of other books. And the response to that has been terrific. But I just can't remember her name at the moment.
It's Selena Tusi
Yes, sorry, yeah. And she had one or two interviews on the news, and I think we can put it down to her because she is just the most beautiful person, and she comes across with a great sense of humour and a great sense of humility. And I think that the response to this book has been, I just love the idea about the hair and the person and the fact that it's a poetry book for children, So the response to that has been immediate and and it's still going on. It's the best seller in most shops at the moment, along with that. And so yes, that's happened, but I'm particularly interested in the Ockham Awards because the last 4 years I've read the New Zealand novels because a few years ago I decided I'm totally obsessed with English and American fiction. It's something I love. And I never read any New Zealand novels, so I set about reading the long lists for the Ockham Prize. And the last 4 years, well, last year I actually didn't, because I didn't have quite the time. And the first one I read was Aue by Becky Manawatu, who was actually going to come to this thing. And as soon as I read that, I thought, I don't think I need to read the others. I think this one's going to win. And I was right. But anyway, that's beside the point. The 3 years before that, I only chose the winner once. I preferred other books. But I took a particular note at the time how there's virtually no response to that. There's a little bit. It gradually comes a little bit later in the year. People are saying, oh, this is the book that won the Ockham. Last year it was Fiona Kidman's, and that had a good response.
Yes.
I think people registered with that. The year before that was the book by Pip Adam, The New Animals, or something like that, which I read and disliked intensely. And I couldn't believe that it was a winner, and it actually didn't, and it still hasn't done very well. But the exceptional book, and didn't have much response, was the one written by the Ohakuni person who, no, I've just forgotten his name at the moment. He grew up in Rautihi, and the book was set in Australia about
Stephen Daisley.
Stephen Daisley, thank you. Well, his book was wonderful.
He was raised in Wanganui, so he
Was
comes
he?
to
Oh,
our
right.
bookshop. He lives in Perth, but he comes to our bookshop.
Oh, does he?
So
I thought you
Lesley's
know-
already claimed him.
Yes, I have claimed Stephen Daisley.
Well, he is a great, his book won the first year I did it. It was about the dingoes and shearers in Australia. And, you know, it's a mark of a good writer and a good book when, because I decided I had to read these books. Here was this one on dingoes set in Western Australia and shearers. I'm not interested in any of that. I don't really want to read this book. But it was just fantastic. He's a wonderful writer. And I'm only saying this because I was enthusiastic about it. It won the awards. Nobody, I'm sorry, somebody did. But it didn't have a big impact, and it still hasn't. We still have to say to people, do you know Stephen Daisley? No. He won that award? No, I don't remember. So we never got that message across, which we have done this year with the children's one anyway, with Margaret. But what I'm going to, just a little interesting thing is here that he is writing a book about his life in Ohakune. Is that right? Do you know?
He is writing one, it goes up the Wanganui River. He's a Vietnam vet, and his next one is about returning and to New Zealand, and it does travel the book in the book, but evidently they go up the river to sort of heal themselves.
And so he won the a scholarship to spend 6 months or a year writing in the cottage in Wellington, Thornton Cottage. So he's actually supposedly written the book, so I think that'll be a good thing to happen. But what was I talking about?
I don't know, but you've answered brilliantly. And Lesley, what about you? This author that
Well, fortunately, I've known his sister for a long time, so was raised in Rautihi, worked in Wanganui, but because I knew I had that contact from way back really through his sister. So we've really supported Stephen. He is an excellent writer. He's always had a yearning to write, and when he finally produced his first novel, yes. The first one actually won an Australian award, $50,000 or something like that. He's a lovely person, and he just has that ability to write. So we do promote Stephen, because we do sort of claim him, as you say. Selena Tusitala Marsh, she came to Whanganui for the Literary Festival 2 years ago. And Bruce is right. She is beautiful on the outside and beautiful on the inside. And her book is fabulous. Now, when a book wins the Children's Book Awards, we find, yes, because we have so many grandparents that come into our shop and want their grandchildren to be reading, the grandparents seem to know about the Children's Book Awards. That's what we discovered. So they will come in and ask for Selena Tusitala Marsh. So of course, because we know her and because we love Mophead, we have sold a lot of copies of that. But the other adult, the Ockham Awards, no, it doesn't really, I don't know whether it does with you, Kelsey, it doesn't really make a difference to us. Kirsty Powell is different because she came to our shop and we had an event, and I bought a set of The Strength of Eggshells for our book clubs to read. We've got 3 book clubs, and they all loved it. I read it and loved it. It's a good part of it is set around the bridge to nowhere. So we've really promoted Kirsty's book. We liked her as a person. We thought it was excellent writing, a great story, so we have sold a lot of Kirsty's book and continue to. And yes, I had been following her, so I did know that she'd won the Book Lovers Award. But the Ockham Awards, no, I agree with you about New Animals. I forced myself to read it.
I think, oh no, I think I lost what I was going to say now. Sorry, go on.
Anyway, you're in New Zealand.
Yes, so
New
I've
Zealand
chosen,
Bookshop, so...
where I work is called the Hunterville Village Bookshop, and it's a village of different things that have come together. And my husband and I first built a bookshop that's morphed into 100 different things now, as Rachel would say. But the focus for us has been on little and rural in New Zealand. And I've sold, I don't know how many copies of Jock's Country. I just sell it all the time. If I get a calendar with them on, if I get a book with them on. But that's our location. Our land, our people, that also Ross Highland came in and met with me. He signed books. We did a book launch on our biggest day in Hunterville, which surprisingly we get 10 times as many people who actually live there visit. So there's something to be said for that. But I don't find that people look at, you know, it's not like a sticker on a bottle of wine. I think they've either heard about it or they stumble across it while they're in the shop. I think that's one of the things that the Listener, not being in production, that people used to come in and say, I saw this in the Listener. And I think I do hear people say about, I heard it reviewed on the radio. But I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, I saw it on the list and thought I would read it.
Can I just, because Bruce was saying, I wandered into the bookshop and said, well, I heard about this book on the radio and I can't remember the author or it was about so-and-so, and I know which one I named. But I find the reviews a very good source of knowing what's going on. And surely they pick up on are they more likely to put it on the radio if it's won an award?
Oh yeah, I think well, there's a big push behind the Ockham Awards. It's run by the Booksellers Association and another association, I can't remember what it's called, the sort of literary association. And as money goes into it, of course, for years it was funded by Montana, and we used to call the Montana Awards. And they used to seem to get more publicity. They put more money into it, I think. But it does get noticed. But what I was going to say before was it's a real pity to me that the Booker Awards, the American Pulitzer Prize and the Women's Prize used to be called the Baileys, the Women's Prize for Fiction, which just announced the other day. We get more reaction to those than we do to the Ockhams, which really upsets me in a way, because I feel our big push should be the New Zealand novels. And we are certainly missing the Listener terribly. I mean, that was a terrible thing to happen for us, but as independent bookshops, I I'm talking about, not just people who want to read the listener. It was the source for people picking up on New Zealand books, and they gave a good push towards New Zealand books. And Steve Braunius, who was the editor, is now doing a very good job with another news site, which is sort of like Stuff. It's called News Desk or something like that. And he's publishing his own bestseller list, which is just New Zealand books, which is really good. And I don't know where he gets his figures. I think he gets it from Nielsen. But that's very good. But yeah, it's a real pity because a lot of money goes into the orphans, and it's not just the fiction prize, it's the non-fiction and the illustrated and the poetry. And for some reason or other, the publicity which, you know, is put into it, and we support it, and there's a lot of, we have to pay for the posters, and we promote all that, and we promote the lead up to it, and then when the shortlist comes out, we promote that. But there's just, I don't know, people just don't seem to register with it, yet they register with these overseas ones. And people get quite excited about the Booker Prize, which the shortlist is going to be announced next week. I shouldn't tell you that because I don't want you to know about it.
I think he should be on the judging panel for the Ockham, so he can pick a winner.
I think the New Zealand Society of Authors send material through to Radio New Zealand and other media, and it's up to them to pick it up. And I think that's where some of the reviewers get their clues from, as to what to choose.
Yeah, I think Radio New Zealand, and like the listener, they are independent like us. So I think you can trust a radio or a listener review because they're not subservient to publishing or our industry or anything like that. Sometimes they just won't. They don't like a book, they just won't do anything with it.
We're very fortunate that Kim Hill is a great lover of books. And like you, and I don't know whether it's the same for you, Kelsey, but we do find with reviews on Kim Hill, and also Catherine Ryan, but also Kim Hill, that we do get a reaction. People come in, they want whatever has been reviewed. She does a great service, I think, to independent bookshops. But she has a passion for reading and a passion for books, and yeah, every now and then I think, gosh, I should send her a card to say thank you or something. But yeah, most appreciative. Do you find that, Kelsey?
Yeah, I find it's another way for me because I'm so tiny. So I have just 2 publishers that call on me. The rest I have to go out and seek. But customer feedback or conversations is actually a way that I'm finding out about those different types of books as well. And that's why I just mentioned about, you know, the listener or the radio as opposed to a book award. So children's book awards, I think, they're always super exciting. You get such a variety of books that have won awards. You'll get some in Te Reo and some in English, and some that are funny and some that, you know, have a sensitive or a serious undertone. So I do like the children's book awards, but I find more it's the customers for me, again, because I'm tinier. And if I haven't got it, if it's not a New Zealand book, I always get it for them. And, you know, in the past I have with Bruce McKenzie Booksellers and got them to send me out something. But yeah, for me, the children's book awards perhaps have more impact than
That brings me to another question. Sourcing your books is one thing, but let me just add that running a bookshop is actually a hard yakka, and it's a labour of love. It's not a good way to make money. Probably having a cake shop might be a good way to make money, although that's hard too. But tell us about sale or return books, and particularly because I'm sure there are authors here who really want you to help sell their books. What's your policy? How do you deal with it?
Well, I am very keen on New Zealand literature, as I've already said, and I do try and support local writers, and anybody that comes to us and says, I'd like you to sell my book. But we have to balance that with the fact that you will sometimes be offered a book that you actually don't like. It might be morally you feel it's not right, or and there are so many self-published children's books these days that are just quite frankly just not up to standard. But in many ways I feel we have to turn a blind eye and say, well, this person's local, you know, it's a good idea, let's give it a go. And we are now saying that we take, if we decide to take an author's book, and they're not in the general publishing run, we'll take them on consignment, and we will pay them for what we sell. And we'll pay them in advance if they want us to, but usually we're not so much worried about that. So we basically won't take the risk of 5 or 10 copies, but I'm quite happy to take 2 or 3 copies and not worry about sale or return. When you talk about sale or return with the big customers, we are now offered mostly their entire list. We can buy sale or return, and but after 3 months you're allowed to return what you haven't sold. And the publishers mainly use that to force in a large quantity of a new book. So I'll try to know we want you to have 20 and feature it, you know. So that's where the sale of return comes in, so you're not worried if you don't sell that full amount. But over the years, I've become very disillusioned with that process, because you have to return them, and your freight costs on a book, you have to pay for it for the books to come in. And the cost of returning can be very expensive now, because some of them have to go back overseas, etc. So I tend not to buy with sale or return in mind. We are now returning less and less. The good publishers, the big publishers, Penguin, Collins, Hachette, and Allen and Unwin, send you a recall list of books that they will take back after 3 months, and you can pull those out and send them back. We do that, but basically I'm quite happy. We feel there's only 3 of us choosing the books, mostly me, that if I've made a mistake, it's my fault, really. So we'll get rid of it sometime in the end.
What about you?
Well, we're similar to Bruce. We you can of course send many books back, but the cost of freight is extraordinarily high. So I have a woman that works for me, Rochelle Handley, and she does most of our ordering. Not quite, I do meet some reps, but our policy is to go cautiously at the beginning, because it's amazing sometimes books will, you'll get a book that will just take off, but we never quite know, and we are in the provinces, we're not Wellington or Auckland, so we might just, you know, some books will say, oh, that's like you, Kelsey, that's not for us, that's not for us, but we have got an intuitive feel for what we think will work, and then we will just put a very small, mostly this is our process, a very small order in initially, and then if we see that it's gathering momentum, we'll then follow up with a bigger order. That way, we find we actually return very little. Sometimes we do have to return, but in the main, we've managed to manage it so that we're not sending back a lot of books.
And you still, though, when an author comes in with a self, as Bruce said, you support them with letting them have 2 or 3
Absolutely,
assignments.
yes. Absolutely. We do like to support our locals. I'm with Bruce that, you know, sometimes they're not edited properly and you think, oh, how can we recommend this book when it hasn't been edited properly? But if we know that someone's gone through the process and written a good story, has had it edited, we will definitely support them to the max because we want to support our local writers. We know the effort and work that's gone into writing a book. So we've got one book, it's quite an interesting thing. It's a bit locally written and it's about a Whanganui man who's nearly 90, I think, but I didn't know him until I read this book. But he's quite an amazing man with what he's done with his life. And this local woman she recognised that he was an amazing man, and she wrote this book about him. Well, it's another book we just sold dozens and dozens and dozens of. It just keeps turning over. So some local books do hit the mark, and they do sell very, very well. So, yeah, we do our best for our local writers, definitely. We acknowledge, as I say, the work that's gone into it, but my message would be, and we generally suggest that they go to the paper and have an article, and that will bring people in. Some of them ask if they can have a launch. We always say, yes, you're welcome to launch it in our shop. So, yeah, we do. We give them all the support we possibly can, but my big note of caution is make sure your book has been edited professionally. It's very difficult to recommend a book if you've read it and found too many errors. I know there's always going to be 1 or 2 errors, but too many, that puts the reader off. So, yeah. What do you find, Kelsey?
Again, small fish, bigger pond. But look, honestly, if someone's driven in out to Hunterville from Plumstead to sell me a book, of course I'll buy it. You know, we're out in the sticks. And usually it would be just 3 or something. If it's something that I don't think is going to be particularly, grab me in little old Hunterville, I would start with 3 without question. Sale or return usually comes through the 2 publishers that visit, and it will depend what that is. It might make me order more, but again, I have quite a good relationship with the publisher that comes most frequently. I don't mind sitting on the floor with my grandchild and, he shows me the book list and I'm lying on the couch and gosh, if I had a blanket I could, just snuggle up against the fire, and so he knows that I'm pretty relaxed. To the point where he'll say, maybe not so much you, Kelsey, but this one, won this award, and I'll be like, no. And he says, I think this one will be you, and I might say, no. And then other times he's absolutely got on the mark, and without hesitation I know I can sell 6, 12 in the 6 weeks before he comes back. So I think they get to know you as well, and what it is that you're buying, what it is that you've sold in the past. So, yeah, I will always support local authors. Our Land, Our People that I talked about before, that had a local farm in it. And pre-sales, I think I did 70 signed copies, and then sold more on the day that I purchased, and then to the sale or return, it turned it out into the hundreds. And if you ever do come to the very small pond, you'll realise that that's quite a bit for us. Yeah.
So although we're just going to deviate from my list of questions because you've mentioned launches, and for the sake of authors who want to come and ask you to sell their books, what's involved in a launch? Who bears the expense? How much notice do you need? And as far as how much notice do people come well in advance and say, I need to book in a launch. And how appropriate is it for people to launch hop? By that I mean launch it here and there and the other place. It's no longer a launch anymore.
No.
No.
Well, I feel a launch should be a launch, and there should be one, you know. Otherwise it should be called a book event. We're very happy to do launches, and we have done a lot, and many of them are very successful. The best ones are where an author has some local connection, like family and friends that all come along. Because the worst thing about launches now is it seems to be part of the current climate and not pre-COVID, that people are hard to get to go anywhere. And it's been the case for the last 5 or 6 years. And our numbers of people that come to our sessions, which may not be a launch, I mean, we do a lot of really good events with Massey, who have a series of events where they bring in really good outside authors, and we have 2 or 3 authors on a night, and we have to get the books in, etc., etc. And over the last few years, we've analysed the unwillingness of people to turn up at these events. So, I mean, they're similar to this festival in a way. That's that type of thing. It's like a mini festival. And not enough people come. So that's been my biggest worry. And my terror of running a launch now is that nobody's going to turn up. And I love doing them, and I really look forward to it, and we put a lot of effort into it, and we usually make a little bit of food now. I mean, gone are the days when we used to get caterers in and had sausage rolls and wonderful stuff. Now we just have cheese and grapes. It's pretty poor, and we have wine, etc., which nobody drinks a lot these days, which is good. But my terror is that nobody will come up, and I'll tell you an event that I held for Michael Houston, who had done this beautiful box set of, this is not a book, but a box set of the Beethoven sonatas, and he's a good customer of ours, so I feel I wanted to do this launch for this expensive set, and nobody turned up. There were about 2 people came, and we laid out really good food, and I really wanted to give it a good thing. I actually went out while my daughter and the other staff were just chatting with the 2 or 3 people that were there, and Michael, who looked very embarrassed about what was going to happen, and I actually got on the phone and rang 2 or 3 people that I knew him and knew me, and said, could you please come? But they didn't come. So anyway, so that is the sort of pressure it puts you under. So I said to my daughter, who manages the shop for me now, let's take a new attitude to book launches. Let's not worry if nobody comes. Let's just have nice food, nice wine, nice people. We'll talk to the author and 1 or 2 people that come up. And it's just like having a party at home. Come to dinner, and there's no sales worry about it. Don't care how many copies you sell. Don't care how many people come. Just enjoy it, and then it might happen better. So that's my new attitude. I haven't done it yet, because we had 7 or 8 events lined up. They've all been cancelled. They've all been cancelled, which is a pity. But the background, I should say the backbone of the book launch is that the costs should be shared. With the big publishers, they used to be very generous, and they would give us an amount to cover the food. and the wine. They don't do that anymore. Sometimes they will say, well, we will pay for half the wine and the food, and we send them a bill for that eventually, and quite often it doesn't get paid. So it's not easy now to get money out of the publishers for it. With a small publisher, sometimes they're very generous and they will give us something towards it. Unity, who have a lot of book launches in Wellington on a regular basis, they charge the publisher, they charge the author as an addition. So they've raised their launches to a level where they're presumed to be so effective that you can actually put a price on them.
Interesting. And Lesley, Pages have a lot of launches.
We seem to have people that want to have launches there, and we've now started a gallery next door, an illustrators gallery, and that provides, we've just had Maria Gill, who's written a lot of children's non-fiction, so we actually had that, it was a book celebration rather than a book launch, but we had it in the gallery because then people could socially distance a little bit. For those that were worried about COVID, and I thought under level 2 maybe, I didn't quite know what the ins and outs of it all were, but we had it in the gallery, which gave us a little bit more space. So yes, we do have a lot, so we try and be very kind to our local writers that want to have a launch. We say, look, we'll provide the tea and the coffee. If they want wine, that's fine by us, but we say you have to provide the wine. And we pretty much go half and half with nibbles. My husband actually makes great asparagus rolls, so generally I ask him to whip up some asparagus rolls. So, yeah, we've had a lot of launches. We've never had anyone not turn up, touch wood, but I get what you're saying, Bruce. There's, yeah, I guess, I don't know, they say like Sandra Morris, who is exhibiting in our gallery, she's an illustrator you'd probably be aware of. She came down to live in Wanganui from Auckland, and she said, well, in Auckland you don't get people because there's so much on. But in Wanganui she feels there's less on, so you're more inclined to get people coming to things. So, but anyway, we definitely do have a lot of launches, and I'm a little bit like just what you said, Bruce, we just go with the philosophy that we're doing our best, and come along and have a happy time, listen to this author, have a look at the book, hopefully buy a copy of the book, and we just don't allow ourselves to get too stressed about it. We just go with it and enjoy it, and that seems to be quite a good philosophy to have. That's what I find.
Can I ask a question here? Does the time of day or evening or night make any difference to to the launch? Like I found that people will more likely come out, say, early evening rather than night.
Yeah. Well, traditionally we think 5:30 or 6:30 is the best time. Later ones are difficult to get people to come. Sometimes we have 8 o'clock ones, and well, no, sometimes they do work. I don't think the timing really matters. During the day it's not so good, but it's not so much the time, it's a little click you have to make to somehow get the message out that something's good to go to. And that's what we're lacking, and I feel it's a communication thing. Now, in the old days we used to put advertisements in the paper, can you believe it? Spend quite a lot of money on advertising a book launch. And, well, nobody notices those sort of entertainment things in the paper anymore. If we put them in, they're useless. And so most of the advertising is now done by Facebook or Instagram. So we try and send the message out that way. But unfortunately, that's now become an overcrowded field where, and so many people will say to us, oh yes, I saw you've your Instagram about that sounded wonderful. I decided I was going to go to that, but I forgot about it. You know, so everybody forgets about what they see on their Instagram and their Facebook because they don't feel it's important anymore. So the old style of advertisement, and then we post invitations to launches. That's the best way, but there isn't a big database around now of people that want to see that sort of information. So it's to get people to come and the whole atmosphere of making these things happen. That's the hard part.
But is there not a certain responsibility on the author themselves to invite people, like you were saying about family and local?
They do. With our experience is that they do invite family and friends.
Yeah.
But talking about the time of the day, I must be Kelsey to say, but one thing that worked really, really well for us, this is the only time we've done it, but we're definitely going to do it again. We've got a little tiny publishing wing attached to our business, and we did a little black and white book for babies as something to get the ball rolling. And we were so busy at the time, this is going back sort of December last year, I actually said to Kirsty Powell, oh gosh, because she visited, we haven't got time to have a launch, we're just so busy. And she said, oh, you launch everyone else's book, you've got to launch your own. So I thought, oh, that's right. So what we did, and it was Kirsty's idea, she said, have a breakfast launch. So what we did, we've got lovely strawberry farms in Wanganui. So we went out to the strawberry farm and bought all these beautiful fresh strawberries, got some bubbles, and we just kind of hand flies across the counter and put a poster up. Anyway, we've got a great turn at 8 o'clock in the morning, got a great turnout. And then what we did, what was really nice, because there was strawberries left over and bubbles left over, we kind of floated, so it really wasn't a float, through the day. Like when customers came in, they said, oh, we've launched this book today. Would you like some strawberries? Would you like a glass of bubbles? So the launch kind of spread throughout the day. And it was a really lovely occasion. So we vowed we'd do that again. So I've just had an illustrator call on me last week who wants to exhibit in our new gallery, and I told her about that, and she said, oh, can we please have a breakfast opening for that? So we're going to follow through on that. So, yeah, but how do you find it in Hunterville?
Well, we live in the sticks, and so I've only had the one book event with Ross Highland, and then Rachel mentioned that someone was keen to come up. So part of the philosophy of the shop is community connectedness, and so for that I talked with the book club to suggest that we'd have a book reading, which then we will advertise and then more people could come. Of course, COVID has put a bit of tie-ho on bigger events, but probably if it was a baby's book, we might go to the play centre to connect with the families that are already there and then invite our community in. So we try and involve the community as much. It's a very small town and a very small business, and anything that we can do that brings people together. We do a whole lot of extra things from the Bookshop. So we publish the little magazine for the township, which is written by a local lady. I'm in a number of groups within the town, so we're often bringing groups together. We've got a population of 500, so anything that we can do that fits alongside something else that's happening, that's probably how we manage that.
Actually, I have to say that last time I was there, I don't know what we might have done to change it, but I walked in, because Kelsey used to have a little tiny traditional bookshop across the road from where she is now. She moved over to this place. I don't know what it was before, but it
was a drapery.
It was a drapery. Okay, I don't often go there. But it's quite big, and this is a perfect place to have an event. Absolutely perfect.
So we've had other events, but not a launch.
Yeah,
and we just put a fire in, so there was either a fire inside toilet this year, so we're nice and warm.
The geographical area around, you say it's a little tiny place, but actually it is tiny. It's like a little honeypot, and all the area around, people come, and of course...
That's right, and it's pretty social.
Very social.
Social place.
old-fashioned
We've also
community.
had, somebody's recently moved their business into town, into the buildings that they used to be in, and they have bought with them 30,000 books. Now, their 30,000 books are antiques and collectibles and second-hand, and what my auntie would have called airport books, and, you know, all those sorts of things. So I still feel that my niche of having just New Zealand books, and, you know, newer New Zealand books, or ones that you really want to sit on the couch in front of the fire and read, will still work alongside that, knowing that there was 30,000 other books coming into it.
And it's not too far from Whanganui or Palmerston North if you had people from Wellington or wherever, publishers and authors who wanted to have an event at your place. There are plenty of places around to stay. But thinking about what the three of you have been saying, I think there is a lot on in Palmerston North all the time. Probably more than in Whanganui, where audiences seem to be very hungry. And I think you may find that too, because of that thing of being a little hub in a wider area. But Palmerston North audiences, whether it's for launches or any kind of event, they're quite small, aren't they? Not a lot of people turn out.
They are, but I mean, occasionally we can completely reverse that, like the two launches we did for Cineric Temple Camps books, which the second one was just out. We had to reduce the number to 150 because of COVID, because the previous one we had over 200 people came.
Did you fit them into your bookshop?
Yes, we did. And, but we had the advantage of the library next door, so they could shift there to sit and hear and talk. But again, he's an exception because he's a very good speaker, and he's very much loved by the medical profession locally. You know, he's a senior pathologist in Palmerston North Hospital, but the rank and file of that hospital want to buy his book because they just love him.
He's a beautiful writer.
Yes, he's a very good writer, and he's a very good speaker. And the subject, which is not a subject I would have chosen to write and sell a book about, is amazing how he handles it. But I mean, that was just a point of saying that he's an exception. Yes, I don't know why. It's very difficult now to get Palmerston North people to come to anything. I recently it was a very good customer of ours who reads everything, travels around the world, goes to France and Scotland, is retired librarian, loves reading, wants to come to everything, and she never turns up at all these things. And so I said to her a couple of years ago, I said, I'm using you as a sample. So I'm testing now, I'm watching you to see when you come to our events. So I said, this is not anything about you personally, I'm using you like we would use a mouse on a medical test, you know. I want you, you're my sample now. And anyway, so I just started off this and I did a launch for Craig Cliff's new book. He was born and raised in Palmerston North, and he's had 2 or 3 successful books done by Random House in England. So his new one came out, I thought, we've got to do this, and I put a lot of effort into it. And I said to this mouse of mine, I said, you know, I'm posting you the thing, you'll get it on your email, it's on a Tuesday night, there's really nice food and wine. She didn't come to it. So I said to her after, you didn't come. Oh, no, I had something else I had to do that night. I was going to come, but I couldn't. So this is what we're up against all the time. People just don't know, and if they do know, they forget. And there's something we have to do to actually get people to come, and I've never found out what that is, apart from spending a lot more on advertising.
Oh, when we crack it, we'll let one another know.
Yes.
Now, for the sake of authors out there and independent publishers who are in our audience, what kinds of New Zealand books, what genre of New Zealand books do you find people want to buy? You mentioned Craig Cliff, and that's where I went, you know. I mean, this New Zealand crime is actually getting a bit of a name. But what do you find? Kelsey, let's start with you.
I was thinking, don't start with me, because my answer will be much different to the other panel speakers, I think. I sell a lot of books on hunting, and a lot. And that's just rural New Zealand, and they're buying it for teenagers and then for their own interest. A lot on history, the history of New Zealand through different people's eyes. It might be the voyages, you know, from when people came to New Zealand. It might be historical fiction, which I personally love, so maybe that comes across you know, without thinking about it too much. I haven't done sci-fi or what else? And I don't do poetry, and it's not that I'm against poetry or sci-fi. That just hasn't been something that's come across to me. So yes, rural. You know, put your gumboots on, we'll sell that. A little bit of art, a little bit of crafts, but really, yeah, just otherwise, you know, things with authors, history.
Interesting. Lesley?
Well, across the board, really. Certainly we sell, as I mentioned previously, grandparents. We find them marvellous customers because they do want they're alarmed at the amount of time that the grandchildren spend on screens, so they come in and want to buy them books. And so we certainly sell a lot of children's books, New Zealand children's books. It's really across the board. It's like Kirsty's book. See, that's gone so very well for us. But I read it, loved it. Our book clubs read it, loved it. So, you know, you can genuinely say, look, it's a great read. And so, yeah, I can't say there's one particular category. We do sell, quite a lot of poetry. We've got a book launch for Irene Beautre's latest book coming up on Thursday of this week. So Irene lives in Whanganui, and she's quite a noted poet in New Zealand circles. So yeah, we sell a lot of her. I'm imagining that this book that she's launching on Thursday will sell well. Her previous one, titled Flow, that certainly sold very well. So yeah, it's right across the board. I couldn't say there's any particular New Zealand genre that we sell more of.
I have to take the opportunity for a punt.
Yes.
When? On Thursday, at what time?
Thursday, 5:30, and she's going to launch it actually at the Davis Lecture Theatre, which is attached to the side of the museum. And yeah, everyone's welcome.
There you go.
So thank you.
I just had to.
And I've seen the book, we've got it in.
Oh, don't we?
Yeah, and it's beautiful, isn't it?
Well, the cover's beautiful.
Yes, and I think it's short stories, not poetry.
Well, she calls it poetry prose.
Oh, does she?
So,
okay.
yes, so...
I thought it
but
was
it's
like
like,
short stories.
it's like poetry prose, it's like a bit of prose, but if you are a poet, you know the difference.
Okay, all right.
Lesley, when you talk about supporting local people, do you support local writers, or is it more the subject matter being New Zealand?
No, we support any local writer. We love to do our best for them, very much so.
So Bruce, what genre of New Zealand
well,
writing do you think?
At the moment, it's New Zealand history by far. There's an incredible appetite for it now, but particularly for revisionist history, looking at the whole early period. Maori history is very strong for Maori themselves and for New Zealand people interested in the history. I would say that's our strongest area of growth. I mean, it's always been good, but it's better than ever at the moment.
Do you think that's because you're a university town, Bruce?
No, I don't think so. I feel it's coming from, I notice a lot of young men between the age of 20 and 40 are really serious buyers of books these days, and they buy most of the strong New Zealand history books, Vincent O'Malley, all those books, and they're also very keen buyers on new overseas books on economics and history and politics. Those are the areas that we're doing really well. And of course, te reo. I mean, there's an absolute wave of interest in Māori to read to the children, to study it as a language, and just to be generally au fait with the language and the background of it. That's a very strong movement at the moment. Not a movement, it's an interest by everybody.
And it is Maori Language Week this week.
Yes.
So we're predicting that, as Bruce has mentioned, that we will do very well with right from children right the way through, I would say, with Maori books.
And I think I'd agree with you about the New Zealand historical fiction as well, because it's an area which I was not particularly interested in. And I've noticed a really good growth in that area at the moment. I tended to disregard, and I apologise for this in a way, of some of the writers in that genre, because I thought they were a bit basic in their approach to New Zealand history, but there's been some good ones come up, and of course we've had The Luminaries, which is a New Zealand historical fiction book, and which is, I think, has changed the whole tone and the respect for the genre, and a lot of good lighter historical New Zealand books, certainly getting a better, a bigger interest in than the literary fiction, which for us was the other way around for a while. But I find that historical fiction in general, you know, thanks to Hilary Mantel and a few others, is very strong at the moment. And people are quite willing to take on, in a novel, something which is going to involve them in reading quite a lot of history and trying to encompass a lot of characters. You know, it's not an easy read, even in a light, good story novel. You know, it's not easy to have to keep in mind, this is 1534 and that was her sister or that was his brother. That's really difficult reading, I find. But I think people nowadays are very willing to take that on in their reading.
Well, you know, earlier there was mention of it being a labour of love, which I think one of you had actually said to me on the telephone. I think it was you, Lesley. So, what do you do to survive? I mean, obviously there's the passion for books, the passion for sharing, passion for the people who love books, and also the writers, the authors who bring them to you. What else do each of you do to survive? Economically speaking.
Well, I'll start if you like. Well, we've done several things. We of course are strongly committed to the shop. I employ another full-time person, and I've just taken on a part-time person, which I'm hoping will swell to being full-time. Plus I have our boy Friday to run messages, and we've got quite a few elderly customers, and he'll deliver books to them. But we have taken the plunge. As I said, the shop next door was empty. I discovered that there was no gallery for illustrators in New Zealand, whereas every other country in the world has an illustrators gallery, or several. So we took the plunge and decided to start an illustrators gallery, which is part of it's in a separate shop, but it's bringing people. So, and people always say, oh, I'm going next door to the bookshop now. So that's worked really well. We have started doing a tiny little bit of boutique publishing, which we hope to grow, and that's worked quite well. We're just going cautiously. We have 3 book clubs. I find that's a great, I've got a waiting list for people who want to come to book club. I find that's a great form of advertising, because they go and tell their friends, and friends come in and say, please can I come? We have the asparagus rolls at book club, so that seems to be a bit of a draw card. And we're just we like you, Kelsey, we're very community orientated. So we just, I don't know, it's just commitment, it's getting on well with the community. We help the community wherever we can. And yes, we've managed to survive since 2004, so so we haven't made $1 million yet, but I'm always hopeful. But yeah, it is. It's just absolutely. It's heart and soul, and loving what you do, loving coming to work every day, wanting to spread the word about the value of books, and it's just, I don't know, we're just driven to succeed really and keep going, and yeah.
And you have a few what I would call book accessories as well.
Yes, we do have bits and pieces that.
Bits and pieces.
So people come and we sell a lot of books as gifts. On a Saturday, we gift wrap free of charge. People will come in on a Saturday. I've got one customer I'll tell you about. He's a solo dad, and he comes screeching, he's a builder, screeching to a halt outside the shop on a Saturday, and so, oh, Charlie's got to be at a birthday in 5 minutes. What have you got? So I say, well, who's the recipient? So I get a description. I say, look, you can't go wrong with this particular book. Wrap it up, he'll say. And then he'll say, where are the cards? And that particular stand. You'll have to write in it because I can't spell. So he's just the loveliest customer. I know when we see his vehicle screech to a halt, he's dashing and he's off to a birthday party for his child, Charlie. But we do gift wrap, so a lot of people come in on the way to christenings, or on the way to children's birthday parties, on the way to 50ths or whatever, and they know that they can call it and it'll be gift wrapped beautifully. And so we just kind of tune in really to where we see there's a need, and that seems to work quite well. And we offer the best service we can possibly provide. We arrange our shop in a very creative way, so it has its own personality, as I mentioned earlier. Yeah, just all those things. But at the core of it, it's the love of what you do and wanting to provide the service to the community, and yeah, just hard work really, Rachel. It is, you know, we work long hours.
And Bruce, you also have accessories, and both of your establishments have distinct personalities and ambience, very, very distinct. I love each of them before their distinction. So, how have you survived?
Well, I thought I'd say one thing about this is not a survival comment, but about people who own and work in bookshops. In thinking back at all the people I know from my time, nearly all of them have arrived at bookselling almost by accident because they were on the way to do something else, which I was. And I think in general you will find that to be the most original arrival at deciding to be a bookseller. You somehow become a librarian, you work for another shop or something, and you think, I'd like to work with this, you know, and that was my feeling when I got a job as a student in a bookshop, which I wasn't particularly attached to, but I just loved the actual handling of the books, not the intellectual side of it at that stage. So, but I don't think that's the case now, because I think there's been a new sort of romanticism attached to bookshops because we've been through such a bad time, and there's been several films that have featured bookshops as something rather cute and desirable, and a lot of people will now actually decide they're going to open a bookshop, and somebody in Wellington just has, and I don't know who it is, but they're just coming from it totally new. And I know of several people that have done that recently, and good on them. They haven't arrived at it accidentally, they've decided to do it, which I think is more what's happening now. How you survive is difficult because, as I said before, we're up against, still up against Amazon and the online bookshops, but the lockdown and COVID-19 has changed at least the New Zealand public's attitude to buying locally in general. The message has got through that there's more to life than the .com empire and upcoming artificial intelligence and the doom and gloom which is around the world. We must think locally about what's happening in New Zealand and in our town. And so never before have retailers, bakers, coffee makers, nurses, supermarket trolley collectors been appreciated so much. We now see it, as I've always felt, every little bit of a job you do in life is important for the thing. And the good thing about the virus is it set people back to thinking that every job we do is very important, you know, particularly nurses, but even we, independent booksellers who are just selling a product that you don't need, you can get it for free from the library, you can buy it for a quarter of the price on the internet and read it on a device, etc., etc. That way of thinking's gone. People are coming back to the real book and the real shop, I feel. So I'm a little bit hopeful that we will survive. In 2008 we had, or 2007 I had a remainder shop and an educational shop which I foolishly decided was going to be the next big thing. Or not big thing, but would suit us because I really loved this old-fashioned shop across the road. And I put a lot of money and time and ideas into it, and unfortunately I think it would have worked as a grandparent shop because it was beautiful, and it didn't. We had to abandon it because of 2008, you know, the crash and everything else. We couldn't sustain it, and since 2008 we had quite frankly, have struggled. It sums around about 2009, 2010, there would be nobody in the shop for the first couple of hours, and I would be trying to arrange a table of 30 New Zealand books, of which I had one of each, trying to make them look like I had 3 of each or 5 of each, but propping them up with something underneath them, because I couldn't afford to buy any more. And that was a really bad period for independent booksellers. And I felt at the time that we were abandoned by the publishers, because I'm talking about the big publishers here. They were shaken terribly by the new desire to have everything digitalised. So they had to turn their whole backlist empire into a digital format, which is very costly. And they could see the growth and the success of Amazon. So they weren't worried about the humble bookshop anymore. They supported the chains of it. God knows how much they sent to Amazon. They never told us, but that kept them going. And so they weren't worried about the minute quantities that they would be providing to us. And when we came to them in this bad period and saying, well, couldn't we have, look, things are really bad, we want to keep going, couldn't we have an extra 2 months before we have to pay your account? No, you don't get anything until you're paid on the 20th. So that's the problem we've got all along, still got it. You can't have piles of books. And so keeping that together, I mean, the love of the book is what makes us do it. And that overcomes everything in the end, because you want to keep going. And it's demonstrated to me personally, because during the lockdown I had 6 weeks where I wasn't allowed into the shop, and we weren't allowed into it anyway. So we put a lot of effort into trying to improve our website, etc. And trying to cope with the whole thing. After these 6 or 8 weeks, I don't know how long I had before I actually went back into the shop, I reached a stage where I thought, maybe this is a message, this is the end, I'll let everybody else do it now, I won't work anymore, I don't want to. And it was a feeling that's come about from almost, I wouldn't call it depression, but just a sort of malaise you got from being locked in. And that wasn't a problem for me, because I had masses of things I wanted to do. But in the end, I thought, and I went back into the shop, I can't stop this. I never want to stop it. I'm not going to retire. I still like doing it. And I couldn't bear for somebody else to be doing it.
Unlike you, I've been so, well, when are you going to retire, Lesley? And I say, I don't intend retiring. I love working with books so much.
That's so heartening to hear. Kelsey, have you got questions for Lesley and Bruce?
No, I just still remain in awe of them. I think Bruce was quickly talking about COVID and, in the lockdown and that period that we've had this year, has caused reflection for some and, kind of goodbye New Zealand made for others. But I suppose what I would say about it is that we're talking about what other things the stores do now. In books, there's not very much of a margin. There's much more of a margin in gifts and things like that. But on the 2 days before we were going to level 4, I think, I do post office, I do dry cleaning, I do pharmacy collection, I just do this crazy amount of stuff. We make vintage clothes, it goes on and on. And the things that people wanted were books. They were worried that they were going to have nothing to read. And my mother, who lives in Fielding here and comes to this library every week, she was worried she was going to run out of books. And I think there's a little bit telling about what was coming with COVID. You know, like some people weren't getting more toilet paper and more flour. They were wondering about what they were going to read
Well, they can all use
for
the
that
book
sort
stuff.
of
and
thing.
they-
Yeah, well, there you go. There's a practical point to that. But yeah, so I suppose in terms of questions, I'm never going to be in the same league as you know, the others on the panel. But I hear what they say about the love of books, and I joke and I say I don't want to be hit in the face with Kindle when I'm going to sleep and all those things. But there's a certain feeling about getting a book from your grandmother that's dedicated to you on your 5th birthday that you never want to lose that. And you know, there's a feeling about turning the pages of somebody else's book that loaned it to you because they thought that you would love the same thing that they did. So I think it is the love of books in whichever way you grab that. So.
And I have to say, the locals, you know, Jacinda was imploring the nation to support local, and people have poured into our shop saying, we want an independent bookshop in Wanganui. So they have supported us because they want us to be able to stay there. And without their support, well, goodness me, I don't know what would happen. But yeah, we do find the locals, and obviously you do, and obviously the same for you, Bruce. The locals are tremendously supportive. So yeah, it's a marvellous thing, it really is.
It's been a wonderful set. I was just going to say questions from the floor. Please start.
I just wondered, I was getting desperate for intelligent conversations about books and things, and thinking about book clubs. I wouldn't know where to start. But you have yours in the shop.
We do, although
And I was
during...
going to ask Bruce if he knows about anything apart from...
Do you have book clubs, Bruce?
Not our own one, no. We support a lot of book clubs, but they're just independent from us. We don't have them in the shop. No.
Well, what we did...
I'd like to, but I never have them.
Well, we didn't have book clubs, and then I had a woman come along, say, Lesley, you haven't got a book club. Would you like me to start one? Oh, I said, that'd be marvellous. I've always wanted one, but I've never had enough time. Well, she came about twice, and then she never came back. So I thought, oh gosh, we've got started. I would keep this running. And it's been so successful that we now have 3. I could have 4, but I'm not going to commit to 4. I do run them. I'm always looking for someone else to come and help me, but I haven't quite found the right person yet. But what has sprung from this, and this is what I mean, we're always kind of on the lookout for other ways that we can feed into our turnover. I limit the groups to 12, and then I buy a set of 12 books, and then each of my book groups reads that set of 12. But now we're finding that I've even got some fielding book clubs that come over and borrow from our book club. It's like a book club library. So it's growing and growing. So it brings lots of other book clubs within Wanganui and now out of towners to come and have a look. So I'm going to set up one little room, which has been a bit of a dusty place where we plonk all sorts of odd things. We're going to spruce that up and actually turn it into a little book club library.
So you have 4 different groups?
I have 3, but I could have 4, but I'm not going to go to 4 because I'm short of time. So, but our book clubs, people, yeah, well they form, like we've got a lot of Aucklanders and Wellingtonians that have come to live in Wanganui, and they're looking to form new friendships. So they come to book club and they form new friendships. And
We have 2 in Hunterville, population 500.
wow,
And they would have 20 members in each. Again,
20?
Yeah, again, COVID is having a impact on being able to even get together though in those size groups.
Any other questions? No? Anything else you'd like to add? Or shall we wrap up?
I was going to say a couple of things I found out about independent bookshops,
Oh.
which I didn't know. Because I was, as I said before, I was bemused by the title of Indies. You know, it only seemed to have happened since in the last 10 years. And I found out that the American Booksellers Association started a thing which actually came here as well. It's called Indie Bound. Do you know about Indie Bound? Yes, so we had it here, but it never did much.
It's never really
No, so
taken
it
off.
was going
no.
to be a sort of a group of us all working together on publicity, etc. So that was in 2008, and I think that's where the term came from. I don't think it was around much before that. But I'm intrigued to find out that we did sort of try to get it going here, but an interesting thing has just currently happened about online selling is there's a new group called Bookshop.org, and they're going to run a site, or are running a site virtually like Amazon. We can go and look at all, and have a full coverage of all the books. You order the book, and if you are contributing Wanganui Bookshop, and the person is from Wanganui, you will receive 30% of the book that they sold.
Wow.
So, and they're going to post it from either Gardner's or Ingram's.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Look into this.
so that's so it's a challenge to Amazon by a well-meaning person, and if any of you have read Confessions of a Bookseller by Sean Blithell, you know that book. It's a wonderful book, and it's a second-hand bookseller, which of course is quite a totally different thing, and most second-hand booksellers used to belong to a very good international thing called ABE Books, ABE Books, and you could register your shop with them, and they would come to you if they wanted to find. If you had a book, you could sell it internationally. You just put your price on it, and you generally got your price from it. Well, when we started, we loved directing people to ABE Books because we couldn't find second-hand books for people, and they wanted a good source, and they were great. And eventually, Amazon, of course, bought them, and so they all became part of. So he got the whole second-hand trade as well. And if you read Sean Blithell's book, they get the orders from Amazon, and they are continually harassed by them on the number of books that they succeeded to find. So instead of remaining a nice little independent bookshop where you do what you like, you suddenly have a corporate boss weekly telling you haven't sold enough of the books that they wanted to be turned through their system. So this bookshop.org sounds like he's going to do the same thing that Abe used to do, was sell books internationally, but give the credit to your local bookshop. He wants to support local bookshops all around the world.
Oh, what a marvellous man.
So, well, I don't, whether it works or not, I don't know. But then another really interesting thing I noticed the other day, you might have, a woman, Monica, was interviewed on the radio, and she started an online bookshop, and I thought, oh my God, here we go, here's another one that wants to take over the world. But she doesn't. She calls her shop Bookity Book or something like that. She's had experience in selling food and honey or something else online, so she thought, and like us, she decided she loves books and she wants to do it. So I've looked at her website, and it's very good, but and she's just featuring the books that she likes. So she doesn't have the worry that we have, that we've got to have everything. We've got to respond to this, that, and the other thing. She's just promoting what the novels and books that she likes, new ideas, etc. And it's very good, but the great thing about it is she's just sticking to the regular price. So this is a breakthrough. All the online shops get their success by selling the book at least 30% cheaper than we can.
But Bruce, how do they make a profit?
Well,
Because
they
as
don't,
Kelsey said,
basically.
that,
They
you know,
don't.
there's not a big markup.
I
of
know,
course.
it's crazy, but, you know, Amazon spent their first 20 years with no profit. They just got money from people wanting to put money into that.
It was as if they were out to destroy the likes of.
Well, but there is money, you know, it's a crazy thing. There is money for ideas rather than money for something that's been going for a while. Like if I went to somebody now and said, I want $1 million to expand my shop, everybody would have, oh no, I don't think that'll work. You're not that good anyway. I mean, we'll just shift to there, and you know, nobody would take it on. They would want to look at our books and say, no, we're not giving you $1 million. But if I went to somebody and said, I want to start this new honey shop on top of this little mountain over there, I think people will come to it. They'd say, yes, what a good idea, I'll give you the $1 million. So the ideas are saleable, but if you've got a real thing which is going, you're not going to get any extra money. But I wasn't really wanting to say that. All I wanted to say was that I was pleased to see this online bookshop, and it's just a bookshop. There's no extra discount. There's no free postage. If you like it, you pay for the, you know, $4.50 or $5 for the postage as well. No discount, and that's it. And I thought that's a good new movement to be doing that.
I think what it is, it's a little bit like us in Wanganui. People say to me, don't you get annoyed that Whitcombs are in the main street and you're not in the main street? Look, actually, we have a very friendly and neighbourly relationship with Whitcombs. They send people up to us when they've got a customer in the shop. We send people down there, and the same with Paper Plus, which is in the mall at Taupoki. We're more neighbourly, and this idea, this booky book, sounds as if it's a little bit like that she's out. She doesn't want to undercut and be the biggest bookseller in New Zealand. She actually just wants to support the book industry, and that's lovely. That's a lovely thing.
She hasn't got a stock of real books.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Maybe she has. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you think it's all e-readers or something?
Oh no, it's not e-readers. No, it's the book itself.
Oh, okay.
But maybe she's buying some stuff. I don't know. But I mean, what I thought was amazing was that it's not the price that she's selling her product on, which is a good thing, because it's the price that has affected us with Amazon and the Book Depository and Mighty Ape and whatever the other one, you know. But they trade on the fact that they've got everything, which they say we've got everything, and you look on their site and it says they have everything, but they actually really don't. And we give it to you for 20% or 30% less than the retail price and free postage. And so that's been very difficult for us to defeat that.
I think it's been difficult for all booksellers. But do you know what? Last Christmas, when people were ordering from a book depository, they were coming into the shop, some people saying, well, our books haven't arrived, we'll have to buy them off you. And we thought, well, there you go.
But then they could
Sorry.
You can't beat proper service and knowledge.
Well, one interesting thing I found today was
Our time's nearly
yes,
up.
this is my last thing on this. In the US, and I find this interesting because I think this is true here as well. Frequenters of independent bookshops, 3/4 of them also buy up to 5 books a month on Amazon.
Really?
That was a backed up statistic.
Oh.
And I feel that now if you're a real bookaholic and you want as many books as possible, you're going to buy where they're cheapest. But if you can, you know, unless you're very wealthy. So we're up against that price thing. We will be for a long time.
That may be true. But there's hope on the horizon due to love for what you're doing. You know, where love and passion is, there is life. Thank you so much. Bruce McKenzie, Lesley Stead and Kelsey Smith.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And a cup of tea.
Yes. Oh, I must. It sounds like it's a great space. We're on the corner of Guy Street. You need to turn left.
I'm on the right.
Oh, yes, yes. Oh, okay.
I mean, I might have one or two. Maybe something on collective now.
So you're doing session?
I'm just telling Kelsey I'm going to pop up.
Because they catch
Whatever, I'm sure that these two are I'm sure that they've got a shop by now.
Oh, yes, the sheep. I know
Oh,
the
that's
sheep.
right, yes, I know, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's right, I say, well, all these things have been cancelled, I just sort of, confused now about some of the things we were going
I
to do.
said we're not
I'm
The
willing to read
last thing
I
we
started
did
reading about like it was right.
Oh, okay.
Then I realised it's the trilogy, so I had to we're reading it like historical, but kind of like
we should have really done that.
Gosh, wow.
Chief and cat thing.
Right, yes, it would be busy time.
Yeah, no, so,
I've seen I've got a card, I'm that's all right, I left my mind behind.
Yeah. They sold one of them during the
Oh, would you pop into the shop sometime? Yeah. Come down and look at the gallery.
no, she's here, is she?
Writer's plot.
Is she the one that thinks she wrote it?
Oh, yes.
She was. She's not on top.
Do you know,
That's
that's
right,
right.
that's everything.
Not much. Yeah.
No, it's nice to see. I had this horrific slide.
Yes, absolutely.
Who's that?
Transfer card, you know the sign with the
Oh, good.
So of course I had
As long as I had
to
something to bring.
I did, and they were climbing out of the car and I was like, oh my gosh, it's just been like 1 o'clock. This is actually another little shop that's
Yeah,
within
okay,
the
yeah.
shop, but I don't have the book.
Lesley, this is Marie Hutchinson from
You do it?
Press.
Yeah, I'm there.
Oh, nice to meet you. So where are you
That's what I
based?
look like.
Oh, fabulous. And what are you publishing?
Sending a little bit of cool vibe. Oh, beautiful, thank you.
Mr. McKenzie?
Oh, really? Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay, we stopped it. I'm sure we did.
And also Paige, Stone Wetter.
Okay, do you send out, I'll give you my business card.
Please do, because I don't
Also, I was on my brain.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Very good
Goodness, thank you. Beautiful, thank you.
I wonder if she thought I hadn't seen her. Oh, I think apparently she's close.
That's all right.
He's pretty cute. He does Hunterville behind our house.
Oh, well, that's even better.
Got a little cottage. We use it to spend his treaties out. Especially when I got into so much. She's 21. I only think that's the around, so we was.
But I can look at paper.
Yep. Not much time to see.
Oh, okay, well done. Yeah, but
No, I was like,
Doesn't it be great? We love, look, we read a book and love it. It's like
reached us out of our like,
loved it. You know, we've got a book club, yeah, we'll read some things. You know, reading, Michelle Henry, the woman who does most of our buying, she is such an avid reader. Wow, she plows through more books than I do. Yeah, well, I do the net one too. She's certainly like this fiction. Well, she buys most of our books.
I just thought that would come.
Yeah, that was us.
Yeah, that was us. And of course, I like doing that.
Oh gosh, yeah, it's great though, you know, just doing that. Yeah, I was just doing that, but everything else is so much you do.
They come in to play my things, but
Well, look, if you ever up and you know, do get to come in and say hello.